Good afternoon, everyone. This is Doug Drew again. I'll be hosting the webinar today. Today we're going to discuss the advanced production module. Just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, in the first couple sessions, we really focused on everything that was new in MISIS, SBM, as compared to SAE. In the last session in purchasing, we shifted that focus a little bit because a lot of it is familiar and does remain the same between SAE and SBM. The same is somewhat true in this one as well. We're going to be talking about production, the focus being on manufacturing orders and work orders. There's a lot of new features to discuss and new functionality that's available, and that's kind of where we're going to go with this. Okay, because much of it is the same, but the mechanism changes somewhat, okay, during your processing. So the first thing we're going to start with, again, this is the advanced production. So we're going to focus on the production menu of SBM. All right, so we're going to look at manufacturing orders to start with. And very similar for those of you who attended the purchase orders webinar, in manufacturing orders now, we show you what you can refer to as an MO list, okay? And in this manufacturing order list, you get all this information here displayed on the right, including all your MO numbers, the statuses, jobs, location, quantities, dates, what's completed, a summary or an overall view of all the MOs that are in the system. Back in SAE, a lot of you are familiar with the fact that when you wanted to query some MOs, you'd have to bring the finder up and select the MO you were looking for. Maybe some of us set filters to try and isolate what MOs we were interested in. The MO listing over to the right gives you a great view of all the MOs that are currently out there. Again, you can sort off the column, and I'm going to show you some advanced features a little bit later that you can use in this display to help you isolate what you're looking for as well. But for right now, let's take a look at what the MO form looks like in SBM. All right, so if we will click on the new button up here. All right, so when you click new, you're going to get to the SBM manufacturing order. All right, now a couple things to note here. Much of the tabs look the same. Okay, some of them may be titled slightly different, but most of you will be able to get a good idea of what they'll all contain from a data perspective. A couple things to note here on the header tab. We've moved the sales order field from the Notes tab, okay, to the header of the MO. All right. Now, what this does, if you plug in manufacturing or a SBM production assembly item number, when you bring the finder up here, it's going to pull up Backpack and link you up to any sales orders that are in the system building that item. Okay, so what you'll see, listing of all the sales orders, I've linked the I-56 to the A1103. So any sales orders that are out there, I'd be able to link a sales order to this MO. All right, if you're specifically generating the MO for this sales order. Okay. Down here, enter the order quantity as you used to. Some of you will notice there's no revision field on the header tab. Okay, in SAE, you may remember there was a revision field where you would specify the revision of the bill of material this MO is building. In this case, as soon as you tab off the quantity field, we ask you, do you want to populate this order for this parent item that you've listed here? Now, you can click yes, in which case we're going to ask you to tell us which revision we should drive the materials that we're going to populate the MO with. You could select any revision you want. In our case, we only have one, so we could choose this one. Okay, and what we'll see here is the materials have been populated based on the bill of material for that revision. Now, if you have multiple revisions, you can go ahead and select the revision you want, and it will populate materials based on that. Okay, so we'll save this one, keep it for later. All right, but let's create a new one. take a look at what will happen if we click no off that prompt. All right, so we'll use the same item number, put a quantity in there. All right, so this time we get the same prompt. We're going to click no. All right, so what it does is it leaves the materials tab empty. Okay, and this allows you to then customize the materials from scratch, defining what materials will go into building this specific assembly. Right? If you wanted, you could also use this copy from BOM button. Okay? If you had the need, you could choose any other assembly you've defined in bills of material to drive the components of this parent item. So even though I'm building an I-56, maybe I-57 is a situation where it's technically one of those deals where it's very close to the same item, but I need to keep track of individual quantities or costs of it, what have you. But for this case, I want to drive the components based off of the I-57. I could select this. I get a warning prompt saying, hey, this assembly you just chose isn't the same one you're building. Are you sure you want to do this? I click yes, and it's going to go ahead and populate all those materials for me. Perhaps I clicked an inadvertent button there. Okay, so let's create a new one here. We'll go back to the I-56. Okay, we're going to select that revision, populate the materials from that rev. Now, very similar to what we could do in SAE, we can add and remove materials on the MO Materials tab as we need to. However, there's another advantage to SBM that we've added here, which is the ability to add non-stock items. Okay? So what we could do here is select Add New Line, plug in an item number that we're going to make up. Doesn't exist in MISIS. Okay? As soon as you hit Tab off that field, it gives you a prompt. The material part is not an existing item. Do you want to make it non-stocked? Yes, we do. Okay? So I come over here, give the quantity of this non-stocked item that I'm going to use. And then you even have the ability to define a cost that's associated with that particular non-stocked part. Okay, so we'll put $15 in. All right? Now the cost that goes in there is not going to drive any accounting. All right? It's not going to contribute to the cost of the parent item. Okay? But it's going to be reflected on the cost tab of the manufacturing order. Okay? So that when I come and query this MO, find out what cost went into building that parent item, it's going to include any of those non-stocked materials that I've added to this MO. Okay. Let's create another MO. Along those same lines, okay, we've seen we can add non-stocked materials to the manufacturing order. You can also create an MO for a non-stocked assembly. Okay? So for instance, we'll call this test. Okay? This is not an existing item. Do you want to build a non-stocked item? Sure. Put a quantity in here. Go to the Materials tab. Let's say we want to define some base materials that are going to go into this test item that we want to build on this MO. Okay? Copy from BOM. It's now defaulted those base materials off that I-40 as my starting materials. I can add and remove any materials I want. Maybe I tweak some quantities, and now I'm good to go to build a non-stock part. Okay? Now, from an accounting perspective, when you build this item, literally it's going to consume those components on the Materials tab. Okay? Pull them from stock when you build it. You're going to be able to close the MO. Obviously, it's not going to increase stock of this parent item, but it gives you that ability to consume the materials. If you have some kind of situation where you're, building, say, a prototype item, or you're running some tests and you have to consume some components, but you're not necessarily building an item that's in stock. Maybe it's a one-off situation where you're building an item for whatever reason and you want to consume some components. Very handy feature. Okay, so let's jump back to one of our previous MOs here. All right, so MO8. Now, set your dates down here on the header tab. Okay. Release the MO. All your functions now are processed similar to what we looked at in the purchase order up here on the title bar. So release is going to release the MO, and it opens it up to begin processing. Okay, now start on the MO works exactly the same as it did in SAE. This is what you would do to drive and allocate transaction, to move all the material components on this MO from stock into WIP. Okay, and that, along with that, it increases the on-order quantity of the assembly. You could choose to just complete the manufacturing order by clicking on the complete button, entering the quantity in, and then processing your assemble to build the parent item. Okay, close MO is up here, and that's just going to do exactly what it does in SAE. Close the MO out and make it so that you can no longer process anything on this manufacturing order except for transfers to sales. Okay. All right, so the cost tab on the manufacturing order. Many of you are familiar with SAE, know that we showed you 4 costs. We had the bill of material, we had the projected, the used, and the actual. Now we have the estimated cost, which is what you thought you were going to use for materials based on when it was released. So that would be very similar to what was the projected cost in SAE. All right. From this form, you click on the print button, okay, and you can get yourself a quote. Okay, so you plug in your materials, go to that cost tab, get yourself a quote by clicking the print button. If you need to plug in a markup there, put the markup in, we'll do the math and display that on the quote. Required cost is based on required quantities of your materials. Okay, so the required quantities here, that's what drives the required costs. As the required quantities change, so will the required cost. Completed ends up being what you actually used on this manufacturing order. Okay, these are pretty self-explanatory, very similar to SAE. All right, so let's talk about sales transfers, all right, because they're a little bit different in SBM. All right, so in company options, and I'm going to revisit company options here real quickly. If you go under your accounting tab, what you'll notice is under the sales transfer section, there are 2 choices you have, inventory adjustment and receipt return. Okay? If you choose adjustments, all right, the sales transfers, even if it's driven from an MO, those of you who remember SAE, remember very clearly, when you do a sales transfer from a manufacturing order, we drive the MISA side accounting based on item cost, and we send over the MO used cost, or actual if you have that log actual shop ops. Send that over to IC, and that's what drives the accounting over on inventory control. Whereas if you do it directly, we send item cost over to inventory control. Okay? In SBM, the sales transfers, even if you're driving it from a manufacturing order, okay, the MISIS side uses the SBM item cost. Okay, the IC adjustment is now going to use the IC item cost based on whatever costing method you've designated for that IC item. Okay, so the adjustment on the IC side is now going to use the costing method of IC. Okay, so it's more in line with a standard adjustment as if you were to go and do it over an IC. Okay? If you choose receipt return, okay, you're going to find that SBM uses the item cost on both sides. Okay, both in SBM, and we send that over to IC, and you're going to see the receipt take place at whatever the item cost is. All right? Now, as far as us sending the costing information over, that all still works the same. We still send the item cost over to update most recent over an IC, all right, even if you're using the adjustment transaction. But the key thing is the actual transaction itself, in the case of an adjustment, uses the IC item cost. Okay, that's a big change. Now, if you choose to use the receipt return, okay, what you'll find on this form is the manufacturer's vendor ID. This ID has to exist over in ACPAC AP in order for you to use the receipt return, because it's literally a vendor receipt return. So you need to create that vendor, and we'll throw a prompt if you try to set this and you haven't created it. We do a check for it, so we'll remind you about it. But to get yourself ahead of the game, create that vendor over in AP first, and then you can set the receipt return to process it that way. All right, from an accounting side of things, similar to the way it worked in SAE, if you have it set to inventory adjustment when you do the sales transfer, okay, MISIS is going to hit the inventory asset account and the sales transfer control account on the IC side. All right. Now, if you use receipt return on the IC side, we're going to hit the inventory asset account and the payables clearing account. So whereas most of you aligned your sales transfer control in MISIS with the sales transfer control over an IC, you're now going to want to align that payables clearing account to the sales transfer control account in MISIS. All right, so keep that in mind as well if you go with the receipt return option. Okay, so this brings up a question that could come up. All right, well, in SAE, I used to do my sales transfers from the MO because I liked the fact that it would send over the MO used cost over to IC, okay? In that type of situation, you may want to look at using a LIFO-FIFO costing method to drive the accounting in MISIS, because that is as close to actual costing as you're going to get. And in particular, what happens is, if I take this MO8, okay, and let's just say we're going to build this one. All right, right now I'm set to, I think, FIFO costing. So if I complete 10 of these, and I go into Master Files Items and pull up that I-56. On the Cost tab, it's created a bucket now, okay, reflecting the 10 I just built at the cost based on the materials that went into building that quantity of the parent item. Okay? And this is going to happen every time you build something. And every time you receive something in a FIFO costing method, it creates a bucket. And we keep track of the quantities that have been built at that cost, so that when you go to transfer to sales, we're going to pull from the first available bucket. That's what you would want, because that's what's available. So when you do the transfer to sales in a FIFO environment, we're grabbing the first bucket, right, that's in line. we're going to transfer those quantities out, update the quantity used, and it's using this cost. Right? As soon as this bucket's done, it's going to move to the next one. And then you're sending them out at that cost, and so on. And it continues down through. So it becomes a very accurate tool when you're transferring quantities out, okay, because you're basing that on the cost of the materials that actually went into building that subset of the quantity of this item. Okay, LIFO, FIFO cost. And it works the same way with the materials. Okay, so if we went even deeper in this, if we had more time, we could even, drive some receipts off of the materials based on different costs. Whatever bucket's available when I built the I-56, it's going to pull quantities based on the first bucket that's available of those materials. That's going to contribute to this cost. So I'm getting a very accurate cost, like we said, as close to actual as you can get, that went into that parent item. So when you transfer it over, it's going to get that cost. Okay, so that's manufacturing orders. Okay, we've talked about the transfer to sales and the differences there. All right, so let's talk about what processes are going to drive the creation of the manufacturing orders. We looked at all of these, but we've never actually done it. Okay, so back in production, okay, there are a few different avenues you can take. Obviously, we can create the MOs manually. We just looked at how we could do that. We can also use process sales orders. Okay, we go into process sales orders. It goes out and scans order entry, looks for any linked items, and it's going to bring those in here. Expand them out, and you'll get a listing of all the details on those orders and any pertinent information. Okay, so let's say we want to create an MO for one of these. So let's go in here. We'll grab this guy. All right, we'll come down and click Create Manufacturing Order. Okay, do you want to populate this order from the I-51? Because we note that it's plugged in the quantity, the correct location. Click Yes. Select our revision, and it's now created the MO. It sets the dates to be in line with the shipping date of the order detail. And then we save it. Okay, pretty simple. All right. Create another one. Okay. Process sales orders. Okay, the other function you can use, and we're going to come back to process sales orders in a moment, replenish sales inventory. Okay, just to refresh your memory, in replenish sales inventory, you're selecting the IC stocking threshold that you want to drive what you're looking at. So right now we have sales inventory to 0. It's not showing us much. If we go sales inventory to show us what's on order, scan through the items, we have a few details in here. Okay, so we select the detail we want to create something for, create MO. Okay, well in this case it's actually telling us we don't need it, okay, because it says you have enough stock based on the sales needs you need, so there's no need to create the MO. So we'll go up to the I-45, which does show in red, which means it should allow us to create the manufacturing order. Okay, creates an MO for what we need. Yes, we'll populate it from default. Select our revision. Okay, we save the MO. Okay, and the other is process MRP. Okay, now process MRP also has a very cool function. Click on Build Item, New Order. Okay, when you get to the Create New Build Order, okay, you have the option here, and we'll be looking at this when we cover scheduling as well, to select a build mode. Okay, now the build mode can be based on work orders, manufacturing orders, or both. Okay, so if I choose both, what it's going to do is create a work order for this detail. So it'll say work order detail building I-46 for whatever quantity I need. It's also going to create a manufacturing order for this assembly, and then similar to what we've seen with MOs, going to list out all the materials for the I-46. And then it's going to link that manufacturing order to the work order. Okay? So we see I clicked OK. I've got a work order out there with an MO link to it that I can now process. Okay? So if we go and look at work orders now, I've got work order 11 out there. On the details, it's now linked to my manufacturing order M15. Okay? So through MRP, I can create them individually, creating work orders for those details. I can create manufacturing orders for those details, or I can create both and link up a work order to the MO so that I can tweak or customize any of those details, maybe change some quantities, and keep track of the MO cost. All right? We're going to come back to this in a moment as well. All right, so you can use process sales orders, replenish sales inventory, process MRP. All are tools that you can use to generate your manufacturing orders, work orders, or both. Okay? So in process sales orders, let's go back to this. We've seen how MRP allows us to create the work order that's associated with the MO, but let's look at how we could do it through process sales orders. So we'll come in here and let's say, all right, I'm going to create an MO for this I-56. So create manufacturing order. Populate it from the revision. Okay, we'll release it. Okay, MO has been created. When you close this form, okay, select No when it tells you do you want to process corresponding items. Select that sales order that you just created the MO for. Okay, and you might have multiples that you create. I mean, if you have multiple details here, you'd select each detail, create the MO for it. Then you go to the sales order. Select the sales order and say Create Work Order. Okay, we're going to create the work order, pull up the Finder under MO, and select the MO that we just built for it. Okay, the dates are in sync, the quantities are in sync, and we've now associated an MO with the work order. Now, if you had multiple details on here, when you select that sales order, you'd have a listing of every single assembly that you just created an MO for. So if you get dynamic with the seeds you create the MOs for, you can very quickly isolate those through the Finder, select them in here, and now you've got a work order listing, every single MO that's tied to the assemblies being built on it. All of them to satisfy the sales order that you pulled in from process sales orders. Okay, so let's talk about processing the MOs. So if we come back to our manufacturing orders, we've got a pretty substantial listing here. All right. So there are a couple of ways to determine which MOs you want to process, which MOs you don't, which ones are current, which ones may be overdue as far as production is concerned, things like that. Okay? The first thing at your fingertips here is the production schedule. Okay, so you click the production schedule. We already looked at this in brief, okay, but we'll expand this out. All right, we're going to go based on orders. You have the ability through here to click and drag and set due dates, right? In this case, we're talking completion and or start dates. So what I want to do, let's say I want to shift the I-56 out, click and drag, whatever I want to move. Maybe I want to shift the start date back for that one and for this one. And I move them all around, right? Click Save, and it goes through and updates all the MOs based on the dates that I've set in here, okay? Now, if you actually wanted to process one of these, all you have to do is highlight whichever one you're interested in, okay? Let's say I'm interested in MO4, just for your own information. Yellow details are MOs, blue are work orders. I double-click on whichever one I want. Got some date conflicts there, but that's okay. It brings up the MO, and now I've got the ability to process that specific manufacturing order, all from the production schedule. Okay, I might process this one, close it down, go to the next one, and I'm on my way. Okay. Alternatively, let's go back to the MO listing. All right, so on the MO listing, we've looked at how you can sort the columns, right? We can sort it on status, item number that's being built, job, what have you, okay? There's also a couple other features in here that are pretty handy when it comes down to isolating what you're looking for, okay? You'll all notice these little pins up here next to each column, okay? And what this does is it locks that column in place so that I might say, all right, I want to lock my MO and description in place, okay, so that when I scroll to the right, notice what's happening here? It's only bringing the columns over that haven't been pinned. So now I can see my order quantity. Let's pin that one. And completion date. Okay? So you can keep scrolling over, locking in what you're interested in seeing until you get to the field you want. Okay? The pins. All right, so let's drag our MO back over here. Description. Okay, there's another feature. Notice up here, drag a column header here to group by that column. So let's say we're only interested in released MOs, but I have hundreds of MOs in my database, and I don't know where necessarily the ones are that I'm interested in looking at. Click on the status column and just drag it right up top and drop it in. It changes the UI so that now all my manufacturing orders are grouped based on closed, inactive, or released. I expand that out, and now I've got my Finder, my listing out here, showing me just MOs grouped by how they're released. Okay, it's very similar to a report, actually. Look at inactive and closed and so on. And now I can pull up whichever one I'm interested in by just double-clicking on it. Okay, and you can do that off any of the columns. When you're done with it, bring it back down. Okay, so if you want to look based on order date, right, we'll bring it up here. We got a bunch on the 26th. Okay, you got to build a bunch of these today, right? Bring it back down. Okay, so grouping and pinning. All right, very easy way. Isolate the MOs you're looking for so that you can help you figure out what you want to process. The other way you can do this, take your MO listing, click on Find. Click on the Advanced button. Okay? Advanced, we've seen this filter previously. However, in this case, we might say, all right, I want to look at MOs with a status that is equal to released. We're going to add that. We're going to throw an AND statement in. And we're going to say, I'm also interested in those that have a start date that is greater than or equal to today. We're going to add that in. All right? Now, obviously, or actually, let's change this. Let's make this a relative date. So we'll say, I want to use this filter over and over again. So I want to see all my MOs that are released, and I want to see not only just the ones that are released, but those that have a start date that's greater than or equal to today. Right? You might even go less than or equal to today, whatever you want. Okay? You add that in here. I might want to reuse this from time to time, but I don't want to lock the display in to totally applying this filter every time I'm in here. So what I can do is click on Export. Okay, we'll say SBM filter, click Save. Okay, so now I'm going to set this, and it cleared my display. So right now I don't have anything that has to be started today. Okay, they're all getting started earlier. That's fine. All right, I'm going to clear the filter so that I see everything. However, if I want to click on Advanced again, now I don't have to reset the parameters again. I just click Import, bring up my file, and it brings it right in for me, and I set it. Okay? And it applies the filter for you. All right? So import, export, define as many filters as you want, give them meaningful names so that you can very quickly come to anytime you want to come to the MO listing, click on the Advanced, filter out what you're interested in, use that relative date feature, use statuses, define them as complex as you want, plug them in, get a listing of anything that's of interest to you so you can pull up those MOs and start processing them. Okay, so let's talk work orders in conjunction with MOs. Obviously, we've seen I can go in and complete MOs, and I can process them that way, okay, by visiting each one. That's the same way you used to do it in SAE. You'd pull up an MO, you'd process it, it would build whatever item, okay, and you'd move on to the next one. Well, now what we've seen is ultimately, okay, you want to get to the point where you're using work orders to list out all of those MOs, okay? And what you can do on any work order, okay, you can dynamically come in here and start adding details. We'll actually create a new one. You can add details to work orders that list out all the assemblies that you're building on MOs, okay, so that you can process the work order, and it's going to automatically build every single one of the MOs that's referenced on there, okay? So let's look at that. Add new line. We'll give a location first. Okay, add new line. We'll give it an item number. Been using I-56 today, that's fine. Okay, we'll give it a quantity. Let's say 500. Okay, let's select an MO. We bring up the MO. Got to release our manufacturing order first. Okay, come back to our work order. We'll use 12. Okay, plug it in, save it. All right, so we've got an MO here. We can list out every one of these items, okay, that are being built on the manufacturing orders. All right? When we're ready to build them, we simply come in here, release it. We're going to select our action, which we've already seen these before, but we're going to complete. We don't have to do the full quantity, but let's just do 100. Okay, click Process. Okay, go to the manufacturing order. In this case, just bear with me 1 second. We've got to change a setting here. What we just saw was a symptom of FIFO costing, which is also a consideration that's worth mentioning here given that we just got bit by it. What happens is once you go to FIFO and LIFO costing, okay, in SBM, there's a setting to allow and disallow negative quantities. In this case, what happened was on that work order, it tried to build the item in question, which would have pushed quantity of a subassembly, in that case, negative. In that case, you can't process it because what? It runs out of buckets to pull quantities from. So it automatically defaults to not allowing negative quantities when you go to LIFO, FIFO. Okay? Apologize for that interruption. So let's try it one more time. Okay, completed one assembly. Let's go look at MO12. Okay, go to the manufacturing order, and we completed 10. So it automatically drives the processing in the manufacturing orders. So once you create your work orders and you list out the details you're going to be building, it automatically updates all the MOs for you. Okay, so in theory, you create a work order out there, building any series of MOs. You can group them however you want, whatever makes sense based on a client situation. And then you can even drive multiple completes for multiple assemblies that are referencing all kinds of different manufacturing orders. When you build them, it automatically goes out and updates every one of those MOs for you, right? Consuming whatever materials have been suited for that specific manufacturing order. Okay, so once you link them up, it makes processing much, much, much more streamlined. Okay, now there's one other thing to look at too. If you create a new work order, okay, and we're talking manually at this point, but let's say that I know I've got to build some I-56s, right? So I'll plug in I-56, put a quantity in of say 50. As soon as I give it a start and completion date, okay, go out and link the manufacturing order I'm interested in. Got to be a release demo. There we go. And you can do it manually on the fly. Okay, so you can do it through process sales orders, replenish sales inventory, okay, and through process MRP. Okay, so let's pull in dashboard alerts. Okay, dashboard alerts, as we saw with purchase orders, can be customized to help you isolate what's critical, what needs to be processed as well. Dashboard alerts, create one to say, look at current MOs. Let's look at the actions I've defined for that. So the source it's using is MOs. The alert name I've called current. Here are the actions that the user is going to be able to process off this dashboard alert. Start, complete, close, and transfer. Okay, and here's the criteria I defined for this alert. Show me only MOs where the status is released. I want the start date to be less than or equal to today. The idea being I'm only interested in stuff that should need to be started today. Okay, and the manufactured order quantity equals 0, right? Because if it's greater than that, I know it's already been processed. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So anytime I log in, I come to the dashboard alert. It shows me things I might potentially be interested in looking at, processing finding out maybe why it hasn't started. Okay, and you can drive these alerts off any one of the data sources. Okay, production reports. All right, we're really only going to touch on this in brief. However, if you go to the production group, you're going to find production schedule. This reports off that display we looked at. Production schedule manufacturing orders gives us the MOs. Work order transactions is going to do just that, show you all the transactions that have been processed based on your parameters here. Assembly production shows you everything that's been built within the certain subset of date ranges. Components used, this will show you everything that's been used within the date range and MO transactions. Now, some of these reports, you all will remember, were grouped previously in the history group. Okay, we've tried to switch that grouping around so that it's a little more user-friendly in that now, hey, if I'm looking for MO transactions, let me go into the production group and take a look at that, right, rather than having to go to the history. Okay, so we've tried to bring that grouping around. All right, so that gets back to the point we made before, which is all the reports are there, okay, but you may find that they've been streamlined and or included in other options off of a base report. Okay. You also have work order reports. These are specific to work orders that have been created. Okay. And you have manufacturing order reports. Again, all specific to MOs that have been generated. Okay, and that is pretty much it. So I guess at this point we'll go with questions.
Yeah, not so fast, Doug. You've generated quite a few questions. This is Dave Brown in Question Central.
Okay.
So are you ready to take these, Doug?
I think so.
Okay. I do this myself, but I just know the answers to half of them, so I know you know the answers to all of them. Ian asks, what happens if you do not have MISIS Advanced Purchasing? Where does the cost come from?
Well, what will happen is, and that's kind of, if you do and we can actually look at this, under stock control, so we'll just do IO1 here. Okay, so we'll return some IO1s. In theory, and ideally, without advanced purchasing, you'd be using the supplier transfer, and what that gives you the ability to do is actually tell us what the price is. So, you know, from an implementation standpoint, part of the implementation process would be, hey, when you guys are bringing in raw materials, if you're bringing them in at a cost and you know what that cost is, ideally you want to come in here and put them in. However, master files. Just bring up our item here. Go to the costs. What it brings in at is recent. So that's kind of our best guess at what the cost should be brought in at. The bucket gets created. But like I said, with supplier pricing, you can actually plug that pricing in and bring it in that way. So.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca asks, in the MO screen, can you disable the prompts to build or use non-stock items? You know what she's asking?
Yeah, you can't disable those. I mean, that's more of a warning message to let you know that the item you plugged in, it doesn't exist. So do you want to create a non-stock, or did you have a typo? That's more of the confirmation message.
So you should click the no button in that case.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the best way.
Okay. And Joe Masseri asks, what cost is used if the FIFO is used and a transfer spreads across two buckets? Will it use the cost total of the parts for each bucket, or will it take the cost from one of the two buckets?
It'll take both of them. When it flows into the next bucket, that's the cost that gets used.
So it uses one bucket at that cost and then goes to the next bucket at potentially a different cost, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Rebecca asks, what is the reason for changing the cost that's used to IC adjustments? wouldn't this lead to residual balances in your sales transfer control account?
Well, it's more in SAE. We were forcing our cost over to the adjustment, so it was more like a direct adjustment that we were pushing. So we would send our item cost over. In SBM, what we're doing is bringing it more in line with what it would be if you manually adjusted that item over in IC. So, yeah, as far as the theory behind why it has changed, I'm not sure.
Okay, but I would suspect it's a good idea not to flip that switch back and forth too much, right?
Yeah, I mean, if that ends up being an issue, you can certainly go back to, in this case, you could just choose receipt and then just map your payables clearing off to the sales transfer control. And in that case, you would see item costs come over, and it would be the same in both. But actually, I mean, if you think about it, in SAE, you would encounter that same type of situation if you were to do the sales transfer from a manufacturing order that, say, had material component cost that was different than parent item cost. You could hit that same situation if you did the transfer from the MO, which is why the option was always there. If that didn't work for you, you could always go back to just processing it directly. But it's important to be aware of the fact that now, if you do it directly, you may want to look at using that receipt return.
Okay, Rebecca says, how many FIFO buckets are there? Have you counted them, Doug?
I haven't, but it creates a new bucket every time you bring in quantities at a new cost. So, in theory, you could have quite a few.
I heard that the answer is 4 billion, but I've never counted them.
Yeah, well, if the question was, is there a limit? No.
Okay, Eva Patterson asks, what is the difference between a work order and an MO? Can you explain that simply?
I can. The work order provides you the ability to build assemblies, and any number of them, with the idea that when they're built, we're going to consume components based on the bill of material revision you're specifying for that item. Okay? So if I complete this, I'm using the components of the I-56, and I'm building it. However, I have the ability here, okay, to add as many lines as I want, building as many assemblies as I want. An MO gives you the ability to build one assembly and customize any of the materials that are going into building that specific quantity of that assembly. Okay? Where the enhancement here is, first of all, we have work orders in SBM, and this gives you the ability to link a parent item to an MO that potentially has customizations made to the materials, and you can build them all by just setting the action over here, complete, 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 and you could set complete to every one of these details all the way down, click on process, and it'll go through and process. You could have 50 details on this manufacturing order, building 50 different assemblies that are all linked to their own MOs, that all have customizations defined for them, and you build them all with one click. So that's pretty cool. Yep.
Okay. And Dana asked a question related, why would you use a work order linked to an MO? Why not just use the MO? What's gained by using the work order? You may have just answered that.
Yeah, I think one of the major things to that is what we just talked about. But if you're dealing with a client who doesn't necessarily have the need to go ahead and customize materials on a manufacturing order, is it reasonable to just use work order? Sure. This is more advanced production, so for job shops, people that are going to have to tweak the quantities of materials, add and remove materials, MOs is the way to go. But the key difference here is with the addition of work orders, now you have the ability to streamline the process, and based on those options I showed you with the MO listing, you can group by statuses, you can define advanced filters. There's no more using the finder that was in SAE where you had to use that finder and maybe tweak your settings there to get what you wanted, or maybe print a report. A lot of that's available right off this MO listing. So you come in here, you group by status. Hey, show me everything that's released. bam, there I go. So I pick what MO I want to process, and it makes it a lot easier for the user to figure out what they want to do. You know, but the same is true with this grouping. I mean, you can use it off work orders as well. I kind of get off topic there. But it really depends on what the situation is you're dealing with. There are certain situations probably where you wouldn't need MOs. But the ability's there, and we've really amped it up in SBM.
Gee, Doug, for a moment there, it felt like you were beating up on ACPAC finders.
Oh, not at all. No, I didn't mean it to sound like that. I was just saying we've taken that and you know, put
Okay, Dana asks, is it possible to link MOs on the schedule, making one MO start dependent upon the completion of another? Is that getting ahead?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll kind of get into that once we get into scheduling, yeah.
Okay. Come again another time, Dana. But Dana asked, do all MOs appear on the UI list forever, even if you have thousands?
Well, they would. You control the display you're looking at. You know, right now I've got 16, but in company options, on the display tab, you define the records per page. So if I set this up to be 10, you know, that's going to isolate how many records are on each page. So the way that works is we'll reset the desktop, and then when I come to production, let me blow this up again, production manufacturing orders. Now I've only got 10 records, okay, so it's showing 10 of 13. So down here I'm aware of the fact that I'm not seeing 3 of them, so I might click the next page, okay, to get to the next set, or I go to the previous set. That's why these arrows are up here.
And Doug, if I might, I think you also alluded to the fact that you can use the advanced find to say, don't show me MOs from last year or something like that.
Yeah, actually that's right, yeah. So that gets where your grouping comes into play, because I find it much easier, and my experience has been a lot of times people want to jack that display setting up so that they're not excluding something they would immediately expect to be there. So you could potentially get thousands, and that's really where, first of all, the grouping comes in handy, because ideally if they're on top of things, they're keeping stuff closed. That's not always the case, so then you get into the find feature and you set those dates, and that actually helps isolate everything you're looking at. And you even use them in conjunction with each other. You know, you can group after you filtered. So, you know, it's whatever works for you.
And I do see a couple of menu entries called purge closed, right? So that's Dana's other question, is there a way to get rid of them?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't really visit these. These are more in line with what we already have. But, yeah, these are very, very straightforward, just like an SAE. Purge prior to, and it's only going to take care of the closed ones. But, yeah.
Also from Dana, does the LIFO-FIFO costing method cause any reduction in performance?
We haven't had any reports of it. So that's the best I can give you at this point. I would say it should.
Okay.
But
Mary from Down Under, when creating an MO, is there any way to automate yes to create from a bill of material question? Any way to automate it? I don't know of any. Do you, Doug?
No, you have to choose the revision that you're going to be populating the MO from. You know, we've opened that up to provide other options, in particular choosing no and then just customizing the MO from its base. But, yeah, I mean, you're going to get that prompt when you go through. Yeah.
Okay. Also, Mary says on the production schedule, you drag the start date and the end date. Can you drag the whole item so that it moves both the start and end dates automatically? Show us, Doug.
All right.
Oh, yeah. But mention to people again how you're doing what you do, because I messed around there for a long time and didn't know the secret of shift drag, right? There you go, Mary. You like it? Ooh, nice. Very good, Doug.
Okay. That takes the whole thing, moves it over. I apologize for leaving that one out.
And now, just once again, show zoom in, zoom out. What do you got to do to get that?
All you do is you click on whatever you're focused, and then you just click and drag. and you can break out the
click and drag. Okay,
yep, click and drag.
Yeah. Let's see. Jamie, when the FIFO bucket is used, does it get deleted?
No, actually, and it will sit there, but what you'll see is the quantity, and I actually think I probably have an example in here. What you'll see is the quantity used will equal quantity received. So, and that's how you'll know that bucket has been fully consumed. So you'll have a record there of the cost, what was used, what was received. Let's take a look at this one, see if we've got any. Yeah, so down here, right now, this was the quantity that was received. This was the quantity that was used. It moved up to the next bucket. Okay? So it would continue moving up and up and up as each of those buckets gets used. Now, that leads to another question, which if you're going to get into LIFO, FIFO, you'll want to be aware of. You do have the ability to purge item costs. So at, once you get a year down the road, you might, or 2 years down the road, you might not necessarily be interested in cost history that took place a couple years ago. You've got a purge prior to up here, which you can hit to clear some of that stuff out.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Mary, also, when you do a sales transfer not from an MO into an adjustment in IC, do the costs work the same way as from the MO?
It works exactly the same as far as the cost. Yes, there's no more, there isn't any more differences, if you will, when you do the transfer to sales from the MO or from directly. It's going to send item cost. We're going to update ACPAC with the item cost, so it's still going to update most recent. However, the adjustment that takes place is going to use IC item, whatever the item costing method is set to.
Okay. Eva asks, can you sort in your MO list and highlight a group of MOs and create a work order from that?
Okay, which brings up a good point there. It's kind of a caveat. No, you can't create work orders from this form. However, but you can certainly group them, as we've seen, and you can use all that filters and things like that. There's no way to drive the creation of a work order from here, though. However, that brings up an interesting caveat, which is also worth mentioning. We talked about how work orders, when you process a work order detail, it's going to automatically update and process the MO. It does not work the other way around. So if they actually go and build an MO, you're not going to see the work order get updated. Okay, and one of the reasons for that, I mean, you can actually, if you have an MO out there, it's all quantity sensitive. So if you have an MO out there that's building, say, 5,000 of an item, you could link that to multiple work order details across multiple work orders that all are building. As long as they're building that item, you can link that MO to them as long as the quantity doesn't exceed 5,000. And we actually do math on the MO quantity. So you could, if you had two details out there, each building 2,500 on different work orders, you could link the MO to both of those work orders and then have that processing for those work order details pushed through to the MO. It does not work the other way around, so bear that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Jamie asked, can you group by more than one field? I know the answer. I'll let you do it, though.
Sure. So let's just, doesn't make sense really to do order quantity. Okay, so you got ordered and then status. So my order quantity, this is all MOs that are inactive building a quantity of 10. I know the order quantity doesn't make sense, but you get the idea. So,
yeah,
yep.
Jamie says, thank you very much. That's terrific, Doug. Mary says, I assume Mary got the answer. She was looking for the purge function. We've mentioned that. Mary, if I didn't get that, go back in. And Eva says, have you thought of this other swell idea I have about purging MOs? And we'll put that in the wish list, Eva. You can't do it now. Dana, you may have answered this already, but is there any import and export functions for MOs and POs, etc.?
Sure. Yep. What you can do, file import, You can import your manufacturing orders that way. Again, this is similar to the way we would suggest in SAE, the export function. Okay, this has also been tweaked. What this allows you to do, you can import and export manufacturing orders. The same is true with POs and work orders. Just bear in mind, you don't want to import released MOs or MOs with quantities in the WIP. I mean, you want to be very careful when you import purchase orders and MOs. We always suggest bringing them in at inactive if you're going to do that. That way you bring them in with whatever details you want. You're going to actually release them within the system, and you're going to open, in the case of purchase orders, you're going to open them within the system, because that way you're not interrupting or conflicting with the business logic of the program. So if you do this, you can do it. We allow it. Make sure you keep it at inactive, though.
Okay, Jamie, can you use dashboards to automate actions and run purges like clear costs, etc., like macro type thing?
It really depends. It's kind of dynamic. It would depend on what you're talking about. You're not going to be able to drive macros. The actions you're allowed are really based on the function you create the alert for. And they change based on whatever alert or whatever data source you're using. So if you click on custom, like for instance, items, this gives me all the options that are available as actions for this alert. So I can look at show bomb and such on.
But it's not going to do anything automatically.
You're not going to ever be able to automatically say, here's my dashboard, automatically do it as it meets this condition. No. It's going to require user intervention. Yeah.
Okay, and the last one, and we may decide to put this off to the next session because I think it's fairly complex. From Colin, would you demonstrate flushing the manufacturing inventory? You want to save that for next time, or what's your pleasure, Doug?
Well, we can do the flush. That's fine. It really just takes a second. Okay, so what we'll do, production, flush inventory.
Well, maybe just talk about what happened.
Not sure what happened there, but okay. Put a location in. So you may remember when we discussed this, this is the other side to the replenish sales inventory. Replenish drives sales transfer. It tells you what you need to transfer in order to meet a condition over an ACPAC inventory control. Flush manufacturing inventory is talking about shifting quantities out of MISIS based on MISIS conditions. So in this case, if we wanted to bring manufacturing inventory to 0 at Loc 1, we would set it to 0, click manufacturer to sales, and it sends all these quantities, okay, based on right up here, you'll see what you're getting, sends them all over to IC. If you wanted to set a different threshold, you can use minimum or reorder. And as you select that, you'll notice that the quantities up here change based on what I'd be sending out. So the top example here, I've got 12,000. My minimum happens to be 1,000 for this item, so I'd be sending over 11,000. So, in cases where you always want to maintain 0 inventory of your parent items, you build all day in MISIS and then shift those quantities over to IC at the end of each day. Very powerful tool. Yep, comes right in and set your threshold and transfer it out.
Okay, boy, that was the quickest one on flush inventory I've ever seen. Good job. Thanks, Doug. And I have one last question. Actually, it was left over from the last session, and a couple of people asked, well, what about the costs of MISIS SBM? How does this compare to SAE? And so, Doug, if I can just wrest the controls from you for a sec,
okay.
I'm gonna take everybody over to the MISIS website. Can you see that? Because if you can see it, Doug, then everybody else can see it.
Yes, can.
Good, good. And I'm going to point out over on the partner portal, over on the left-hand side under partner resources, is something called Price Estimator. And if we click on that, we're going to open a window here which will show us the various modules that are part of the MISIS SBM system, and the license fee that's associated with it, and the annual subscription fee, because I'll remind you that we use a 2-part pricing model. There's initial license fee and annual subscription fee. So here are all the modules, and the base product, of course, is the basic manufacturing module and one user. So if somebody says, well, what does it take to get me started? The answer is $2,500 and $450 a year thereafter. And so you can use this to give somebody an estimate of what kind of money they're talking about. So if somebody says, well, I really want advanced purchasing, and I want that MRP thing, and I want to have 3 concurrent users, make those entries in there, click the calculate cost button, and then you can see you're talking about $7,500 and $1,350 a year thereafter. So remember, that's on the partner portal of the MISIS website. By the way, also, you'll notice that any of these things are hotspots, and they will open up just a little window that explains a little bit more about what that item is. Eva asked the question, what is the cost per database, though? Do you need the full cost of each module for a user? Well, here's the way it works for additional companies, for a company that needs additional databases for whatever reason. So if you need an additional database for a subsidiary, you would pay just 1/2 of the list price for whatever module, and you do not need to have the same mix of modules for that second database. But you'd pay the full price for the first module, and then half price for each recurrence of that. I hope that answers the question. And Dana asks, is the subscription fee paid in the first year too? Yeah, you pay in advance, so it's sort of like registering your car. You buy the car and you also pay the registration fee. So you pay that ahead. Most people will lodge a credit card so that it's renewed automatically. But if you prefer to send a check or something, that's up to you. So, any other questions about the price list? Okay, let's see. You got a couple here. Is it 1/2 the cost of the other databases, including the users? Yeah, basically you take this this price list and cut all the costs in half. The only thing that's worth mentioning from that question is that you have the option of sharing the user licenses between or among companies. So if you have 3 databases, you could, if you wanted, share those 3 user licenses like we're seeing here among the 3 databases. That would be your choice. My suspicion is that, you don't really want to do that, but we allow it. In fact, we allow you to choose that you want to either pre-assign them, that is, allocate them, say 1 for you, 1 for you, and 1 for you, or to say, hey, there's 3 here, first come, first served, have at it. Jamie asks, what about the users for the second company? I hope I just answered that. And what is the price for test databases? Also 50%. When it comes to test databases, we generally don't charge for that. It depends on the condition. But if you say, hey, I just need a database for a month or so in order to get this thing tested, our customer service group is pretty liberal with that. But they also may say, hey, that's not exactly a test database, so you got to pay. But it can be done. That's one of the things we learned from the SAE world. People do have test databases, and we need to have that provision. So, any other questions? Well, not seeing any. Doug? What? Sorry. How long are some typing that I don't recognize? So, sorry, Jamie. You can try that again real quick, but the training, training. That's actually when you use the right fingers. Oh, how long are the training webinars? The training webinars are, the basic ops is 2 2 4-hour sessions, and the others are, I think, a 1 4-hour session. Yep. Okay, but anyway, that's explained in here. You can go in and have a look at it. Also nose around in the partner portal. There's a lot of good information here, hopefully easier to find than it was in the previous iteration of the website. So have fun. Thanks, and we'll see you again. Doug, what's the next session we've got here?
I think the next one is, I believe it's scheduling.
Okay, and we can find out that easily. Let's just go over to the Mises Manufacturing webcast screen, and here we can see that we just wrapped up this one in advanced production, and next Tuesday, which will be March 2nd, is material requirements planning. So make sure you get registered for that if you're not already. Do it right there. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good weekend. Bye, Doug. Bye, everybody.
Take care.